What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new video on my channel. But before we get into this video, what I would like for you to do is hit the subscribe button for me, hit the like button, hit the share button, and make sure you hit the bell icon so that you can get all the notifications possible that you need to see all the content that I'm putting out on my channel. And then when you're finished with this video, go ahead and leave me a comment after you've listened to everything that I had to say. Today, I want to talk about a topic that I've talked about mildly on Instagram, but I want to go more in depth with here on this channel. I want to talk to you all about why, when I break down anti-Black tropes in media on Instagram, do I talk about it from the perspective of race versus the perspective of sex or religion. One thing that I've noticed from a lot of different creators, content creators all over social media, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Instagram, whether it's Twitter, is that they tend to talk about different topics from the perspective of sex or from the perspective of religion. And this is specifically talking about the Black community as a whole. I typically see them talk about it from those two aspects versus race. They almost shy away to a certain extent from talking about race. And we're going to get into why that is in a minute. But before I talk about why they talk about these two aspects, sex and religion, that is, I want to talk about why I discuss race and the perspective of race whenever I'm looking at these different shows and media and having these discussions. Whenever you're consuming content, whether it's a movie, whether it's a television show, whether it's even a video game, you have to look at who are the individuals who are producing these different concepts, these different pieces of art that you are consuming. The reason why this is important is because you have to understand that the individuals who are putting out this content are also responsible for creating certain messages that are being put into the content that you're consuming. And that's also important because we have to understand that art is not just reflecting reality. Art is indoctrinating the individuals who are consuming what they've created. And then there's somewhat of a hamster wheel cycle where they are then taking the reality that's been created from the indoctrination and then re-putting that out there. So now it's hard to see if art itself is actually reflecting reality or if art is impacting reality, when in fact both things are going on to some extent at the same time. And the individuals who are responsible for this are white supremacists for the most part. And here's the reason why I'm going to say white supremacists specifically, because white people as a majority are the individuals who control media. They are also the individuals who, as a majority, control 10 or 11 different areas of activity when it comes to everybody who exists on the planet, even other white people. The reason why they're called white supremacists is because they are doing and creating these different narratives in order to negatively impact other groups so that they can reign supreme. In this case, when we talk about anti-Black white supremacy, we talk about the very specific impact that these individuals have had on Black people and how it's far more severe than any other group that has been impacted. As a matter of fact, what they tend to do is use other buffer groups as a means of impacting Black people as well. So in other words, they create these other groups, or they turn these other groups into their tools or their minions so that they can also do the same things that they've been doing when it comes to impacting our Lord. The reason why I always talk about race is because I want to focus in on something that, one, nobody wants to cover, and two, something that I believe is also impacting the other two concepts I talked about earlier that people tend to talk about. So what I mean by that is race itself is also impacting sex, and race itself is also impacting religion as well too. And I think that the biggest problem that comes to mind when others aren't looking at it from this perspective is that they're not looking at it from a big picture standpoint. They're looking at it from the things that are in their face, the things that they see, the things that are fed to them that are the most blatant and, again, the most in your face. For me, I'm looking at the big picture and what is the main reason why all of this stuff is going on in the first place. Because let's be real, race impacts both sex and religion. As a matter of fact, these two things are actually one of those 10 or 11, as I just discussed, areas of activity that exist. Now, here's the reason why I think people shy away from talking about race. A couple different reasons, actually. The first reason is because a lot of people don't want to get into this thing. Specifically, when I talk about a lot of people, I'm talking about black people. A lot of black people don't want to get into this space where they're offending people who are white, whether they're friends. Sometimes they're not even their friends. They just don't want to be in a space where they're saying something that they believe will make them racist, although they cannot be racist, which I've said over and over and over again until I'm blue in the face. The other reason why they tend not to talk about race is because they really don't have a true understanding of white supremacy itself, the way it works, how it looks, how it shows up. So they don't believe that there's such an importance on race or white supremacy in this case, and how it impacts the way that these different media depictions look, or the way that the media depictions actually negatively affect black people as a whole. So it's safe for them to talk about religion or sex instead of talking about race, because it's a very big pool to dive into, honestly. But the reality is that if we do not dive into this pool, then we'll never get to the bottom of what the main issue is and why we're being impacted the way that we are. And ultimately, what I know is that the white supremacists are trying to create these images in order to indoctrinate black people so that they don't see themselves as powerful and that they accept the disrespect that's given to them. And they also stay in the good graces of white people. So in other words, they want black society to basically capitulate to white society because they see them as allies or people who are now all of a sudden recognizing them and their culture. So I think that's the other problem with people not talking about race. Now, when it comes to sex and it comes to religion, here's the reason why I don't talk about these two concepts as much as I do race or at all. The reason why sex specifically is an issue is because it's impacted by race. And the issue with sex is that when you talk about that, you're putting all men of different races on one side and all women of different races and cultures on another side, and talking about how the two of these individuals are at war. And the main problem with that in the black community is we really don't need any media propaganda that's going to create a gender divide. That's totally not necessary, and the white supremacist is already trying to do that. So we don't need to aid them in creating those messages. Now, should we call out when there are off-code actions or things that are done, whether it's by black men or black women? Should we be able to have an open dialogue where we talk about these things? Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I encourage people to do that. And when I encourage them to do that, I also encourage them to understand where a lot of these issues, a lot of the off-codeness that you see from black men or black women, where it actually comes from, which is white supremacy. They've impacted these individuals to behave in the manner that you see, which is why there is disharmony between black men and black women. But I also understand, too, that this is somewhat of a projection. This is something that is inflated and exploited when you look at the media and the things that are put out there about us. And sometimes you also have these tools and, again, these soldiers who go out here and they continue to parrot the narratives that have already been created by white society about us. Because in reality, the white supremacist really wants to see the dysfunction of black people, because at that point they know that they've done their job appropriately. Now, the other thing to consider too here is that it's also disrespectful anyway to talk about sex by, again, putting all races of men on one side and all races of women on one side, because typically the narrative is that the men are oppressing the women. But it also opens the gateway that we can talk about how a black man is negatively impacting a white woman, which now we get into territory of race again. And here's the reason why that's an issue, because what a lot of people don't want to do is discuss the reality of the way history has gone when it comes to black men and white women. There were a lot of white women who actually were slave owners, and white women also are the main individuals who have benefited from affirmative action, not black people who it was initially intended for. So the issue is we have now gotten to a place where we're taking a general concept of feminism, which really is the original white feminism, and we've applied it to all types of men as if they all can be oppressors of different types of women. But I can assure you that a black man cannot oppress a white woman as a group as it stands in 2024. Now, let's look at the religious aspect. Religion is also something that is a difficult thing to dive into, mainly because a lot of it is rooted in interpretation, and a lot of it is rooted in thinking about the Bible and relating certain acts to acts of God. What I also don't like is that when sometimes people use the concept of religion to interpret different pieces that pertain to black people, what they're trying to do is generalize what happened as an evil act, or as an act of Satan, or as an act of some type of evil doing or coming that Jesus or God needs to fix. We're talking about from a Christianity standpoint, that is, when I say that. Now, this is no disrespect to anybody who is religious, so please don't take me as somebody who is trying to do that. I'm just trying to put in perspective what my issue is. My problem with that also is that when we go just to religion, we're ignoring all of the historical racial factors that exist. One, including that race actually impacts religion as well too. So the other thing that we need to consider here is that when we overlook things as just evil, we give racism an excuse to just be the same evil as somebody who kills somebody, or somebody who steals from someone, or someone who is just a total degenerate. So we try to conflate all these things as if they're the same when they're not, when a lot of times racism and white supremacy have actually impacted some of these other ill, degenerate things that have actually gone on. So talking about religion gives an individual a space to create this idea that evil is just a general thing that God just doesn't like, no matter what it looks like, without giving true accountability to the main individuals who are impacting folks, and also impacting their decisions and the choices that they make. And so when we think about racism, when we think about white supremacy, the main problem here is that white supremacy has created the majority, if not all, of the problems that exist in black society today. So to assume that this is just a general evil that is taking place in the same regard as it would for somebody else who's black, who just does something that's degenerate, is actually disingenuous. And that's, again, not to say that there aren't evils in the world. That's not to say that we don't need to have some type of spiritual understanding and morality, but it's just to say that sometimes when we make religious arguments, we ignore historical factors such as race, tangible things that people can understand, and that actually did happen. And again, not saying that religion is not a thing, and I'm not saying that there's not a God or anything like that, or a higher being. What I'm simply saying is that when we talk about religion, we're not getting into the crucial details of why race and white supremacy is something that needs to be discussed. Anyway, y'all, I could talk about this topic all day, but I'm going to end there so that we can make sure we move on to other topics and whatnot. I hope y'all enjoy what I had to say. Again, if you have not subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me. I'll have a lot of cool videos for y'all to check out later on down the line. And other than that, I hope y'all have a good rest of y'all's day, and I'll talk to you later. Peace.